Business confidence falls as the case for no rate hike grows. Department store Myer has its best sales season in 20 years, and Elon Musk takes on King Charles III. It's Wednesday, the 25th of January, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. Wednesday today. You know what that means?
How do they afford that?
Exactly.
The new episode is out today. Every week, a new episode of How Do They Afford That comes out. And today we are looking at a really important topic, actually, Sean. It's all about emergency money and that question of, in an emergency, how much money could you scrape together? And Canna Campbell, who co-hosts the podcast, is a financial planner and just talks about where that money should come from, what you should be doing with it, where it should be kept, how accessible it needs to be, and most importantly, how much you actually need to have tucked away and what purposes you're actually allowed to touch it for. So it is a really kind of important topic, particularly at the moment, and because an emergency is one of those things that you don't really have much time to deal with when it actually happens, so you need to plan ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to be a little bit trite about the whole thing, said stealing from the children. Is that okay? But I won't. I'll hold back on that.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I sound very serious in talking about it, but I was not very serious when we were speaking about this topic, when Canna and I were speaking about it. So,
yeah, a bit frivolous. I've got to tell you a little story. A couple of days ago, I gave one of my kids $50. He was going out with a friend for dinner with the friend's family. It was a friend's birthday. I gave him $50 in cash, which clearly you just say goodbye to. Anyway, I asked him yesterday, I said, did you end up paying that $50 to the parents of the kid that he was going with in dinner? He said, no. I did use some of it, though, because he had a good reason. This morning he came back and gave me $38 of the 50 back. Unheard of.
So you consider it a win just when unspent money makes it back to you?
Oh, totally. All you parents out there of children over the age of 12, please support me in this. Any money you get back from the money you give your children is a win. $38 out of 50. Woo.
All right. Well, I will mention that with Canna next week and see whether money coming back in from your children that you thought was gone is a suitable form of savings. I reckon it's quite a niche form of savings.
Possibly.
But anyway, How Do They Afford That? It's out today. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll put a link in the show notes as well. Sean, you've got an interview today with Dr. Nicola Powell, the Chief of Research and Economics at Domain. She is fantastic.
Yeah, look, she's just great talent in terms of talking about the property market. They have just released today their quarterly update on the property market. I mean, there's sort of good news in it. When we'll talk about it a bit later in the show, there is good news because there is some stabilisation in the falling of prices. But we talked to Nicola all about what's going to happen over the next 12 months and where she thinks the market is going. So if you're interested in property, well worth a listen.
Yeah, definitely. It's coming up a little bit later on. Sean, the main story, though, this morning, business confidence picked up at the end of last year, but business conditions slowed, according to the highly regarded NAB survey, and that has implications for interest rates.
Yes, and the survey also showed promisingly further easing in cost and price pressures. The last few surveys have told a story which isn't a bad one for the economy. Now, why do we like these sorts of surveys? Because they're almost in real time. A lot of the Bureau of Statistics information that the Reserve Bank acts off are historical. These surveys really are telling us what's going on right now or in the past few weeks. Certainly, growth has slowed since the middle of last year, but it hasn't collapsed. Profitability is slowing, as is forward orders and employment, and still the full impact of interest rate hikes haven't kicked in. Now, I'm relying on AMP Shane Oliver for some of this analysis, and Shane doesn't think interest rates need to rise when the Reserve Bank meets at the beginning of next month. He says the NAB survey is showing a decline in cost and price pressures and a slowing of capacity utilisation, which reduces pricing power. Also, the Judo Bank Composite Business Conditions for Manufacturers in January was released. It also showed a downward trend. Put all that together, what we're seeing is that some of that pressure on prices coming out of the economy.
All right. So what does it mean for inflation?
Well, inflation has probably peaked. In fact, the data says it has peaked and price rises are likely to slow appreciably this year. The Reserve Bank reckons today's consumer price index figure is coming out today from the Bureau of Statistics will come in at around 8% for the December quarter. That's annualised. It's been basing its interest rate decisions on that figure of about 8%. But many economists now reckon that might be too high.
So then the case, Sean, is building for a pause in interest rate increases?
That's right. That's the exciting part of it, Michael. And there's been a fair bit of evidence now that supports that argument. We've also seen some retailers like Super Retail Group last week say that supply chain pressures have eased. And in the US, price pressures have certainly come off. We're also seeing things like coal prices and oil prices compared to last year actually come off a bit. So that feeds through to that inflation figure. There is plenty riding on today's CPI number.
Oh, is it a blockbuster?
It's a blockbuster.
Oh,
absolutely.
Excellent. I like to build up a bit of hype around CPI. Now, how about local markets? What happened yesterday?
Well, the ASX jumped another 0.4% yesterday, taking it to 7,490 points. It's now less than 2% off its all-time high. Lithium stocks did particularly well, with Pilbara Minerals, Mineral Resources and IGO all adding around 5%. The banks were weaker, mind you. National Australia Bank and ANZ were both off more than 1%. Macquarie Group was actually up 1.3%, going against that trend. Property giant Goodman Group jumped nearly 3%. Gaming machine manufacturer Aristocrat Leisure rose 2.6%. And diversified miner South32 was up more than 4%. There was corporate news around. BHP has struck a new deal to explore for copper in Serbia. Obviously, that's all about having that particular mineral to help build electric cars and green energy technology, that type of thing. Cooper Energy slashed gas production in the December quarter thanks to its troublesome Orbost gas processing plant. Coronado Global Resources dropped 2% after its quarterly results. And buy now, pay later group Zipco's share price tumbled 16%, erasing all of Monday's gains after analysts looked at the detail of their reporting and they fear that it will run out of cash. Michael, one for you. Breville was the best performer on the market of the top 200, jumping 8%. No reason, probably just more people making toasted sandwiches, maybe.
Oh, I feel like you might be clutching at straws there just a little bit. And
clearly I've got no idea.
Because you are, in fact, a Breville toasted sandwich fiend, whereas I use our Breville coffee machine every day, multiple times a day. So I understand. The appeal of Breville.
Okay. And buy now, pay later group Block also did well, up nearly 6% following a strong session on Wall Street.
Wall Street. What has been happening there?
The tech stocks have been doing pretty well in recent sessions, Tesla in particular, but also Netflix, Apple and Block. It's early in the earnings season, so the next few weeks will show exactly how big corporates are performing in the world's largest economy. Oil prices have risen a bit, as has gold. Cryptocurrency valuations continue to trend higher, with Bitcoin now worth more than $23,000 a unit. And Michael, finally, the Aussie dollar has pushed above 70 US cents over the past 24 hours.
All right, there's a bit going on. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese arrived in Alice Springs yesterday amid political pressure over law and order issues and alcohol abuse in the town.
Yes, he did. He was meeting with the Central Australian Aboriginal Congress to talk about some of these issues. He was planned to go last December, being delayed. What we have seen, though, is opposition leader pressuring the Prime Minister to visit Alice Springs, as the local police say more work is needed to help address antisocial behaviour, domestic violence and crime in the area. That's got a very prominent run in some media outlets, and Mr Albanese has ended up in Alice Springs. Also yesterday, the Northern Territory Chief Minister Natasha Files visited. She rejected calls to bring in the Australian Federal Police and Defence Force personnel to the Territory, saying she'd be asking Albanese for needs-based funding for certain services. Clearly some great challenges in Alice. Let's hope we can sort some of those out.
Yes, indeed. And just staying in politics, Sean, a new year, new opinion poll. Labor is convincingly ahead of the coalition 8 months into the parliament.
Yes, the Sydney Morning Herald poll shows that voters are backing the Albanese government on pretty much everything, with one exception, and that's national security and defence, where the coalition is slightly in front. But everything else, particularly around the economy, Labor is well and truly in the lead. Albanese has kept his edge over Dutton as preferred Prime Minister, leaning by 55% to 20%. The poll follows a summer holiday period where cost of living pressures, relations with China, and Indigenous voice dominated political discussions. Now, when asked who they'd put number one on a ballot paper, 42% said the ALP, 29% said the Liberal National Party, 11% said the Greens, which is about where they're at anyway, and 8% said independents, which also reflects the last election.
Now, Sean, we mentioned the interview that's coming up a little bit later on with Dr. Nicola Powell from Domain, and it is about the new report from the company that says house prices continued to fall at the end of last year, but at least the pace of the decline has eased.
Yes, so house prices across the combined capitals are $66,000 below the March 22 peak, and unit prices are $27,000 below the December 2021 peak. Now, of course, that's across the combined capital cities. If you took Sydney, for example, house prices will have lost much more than $66,000. If you take Adelaide units, the fall won't be as bad as $27,000. House prices across the combined capital cities are still 25% higher than before the pandemic property boom. Unit prices are 5% higher. We need to keep that in mind. The Domain report says that house prices in Sydney, Brisbane and Canberra saw an easing pace of quarterly decline, while Melbourne, Adelaide and Hobart stabilised. For all of 2022, both Sydney and Canberra recorded their steepest declines ever. Adelaide was the only capital city to have new record high house prices and unit prices last year. Unit prices are now outperforming homes across the country, albeit prices are still falling. In Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide and Darwin, unit prices are now outperforming home prices. Mind you, they're still falling. But in Canberra and Melbourne, unit prices are in their fastest decline ever.
Yeah, there's a fair bit in that report, and the chat with Dr. Nicola Powell is a great one. Now, I mentioned this one at the top of the show too, Sean. Department store Myer has posted its strongest sales in nearly 20 years, with shoppers spending up on fashion, footwear and accessories, triggering a 5% jump in its share price.
That's right. For the final 5 months of last year, sales were up 25%. And profit was also higher. Chief Executive John King was cautious about the broader economy thanks to rate rises and cost of living pressures, but he thinks the department store can keep up the momentum. He said people were going out again and basically wanted to look good, buy more clothing. And they're visiting stores with online sales off nearly 10%. Now, last week, David Jones said sales were up more than 2% in the last 6 weeks of 2023. My share price has more than doubled over the past 6 months. You mentioned earlier, Michael, that you use your Breville coffee machine. Now, coffee machine sales have been very strong at Myer. And I bring that up because only about a week ago for my birthday, I was given a coffee machine.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I was a bit of a skeptic because I quite like the process of going out and getting a coffee. Well, the first day I went out and got a coffee and I thought I'd better have one at home and the kids made me one. The last 3 days, I haven't bought a coffee. I've just been having it from the coffee machine. It's fantastic.
It is fantastic. It's great for two reasons. We've talked about this on How Do They Afford That, about the fact that, yes, it's a bit of an investment up front, but over time you will actually save a whole lot of money doing it at home. And the second benefit, and I suspect this is uniquely to me, is that you don't actually have to leave home anymore.
Leave the house.
And which, as we've discussed before, is really my goal in life.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm a fan. Mind you, I'm a bit worried about talking about my eating habits. I got a text from a friend today after yesterday's show. It said, pescatarian WTF. I don't know what that means, but that was his response.
See, this is the problem when you confess things like that. People hear it, Sean.
Yeah.
Now, just very quickly on retailers, Kogan.com also released sales results yesterday, and they weren't so good.
That's right. Sales were down 33% compared to a year earlier. Kogan, of course, was a big beneficiary of the lockdowns. I don't know whether you remember, but there was a point there where Kogan was about twice the size of Myer in market cap. And now Myer's about 720 million. Kogan, I'm going to be wrong, but it's about $460, $450 million in market cap. It just shows how quickly that's turned.
Yeah, it certainly has. Now, Sean, today is a pretty significant day because it marks the 3rd anniversary of the COVID outbreak, would you believe? The first case was diagnosed on the 25th of January 2020, and hasn't the world changed a bit since then?
Yeah, it sure has. It's estimated that 70% of the Australian population has been infected, which is actually a good thing because that builds a wall of immunity which protects people. New, better vaccines are still being developed, and there's obviously a chance that new strains will become more transmissible and more severe. Now, those at high risk, the elderly and the aged, and those with long COVID, still need plenty of attention. And across Australia, more than 18,000 people have died directly from COVID-19. Now, most of those people actually died last year in 2022. But generally, we've all gotten back to business as usual in line with most other Western countries. Obviously, one nation still obsessing about numbers and deaths is China, which has had more than 1 billion cases since late last year. But overall, we're no longer in a pandemic. It's not quite endemic, but it's close to endemic. And, things are pretty much getting back to normal.
Yeah, it does seem that way. And Sean, there's not a lot of news coming out of the States just yet, though New South Wales is revving up a little bit with an election due in a couple of months' time.
That's right. The government headed by Dominic Perrottet is in a real fight against Labor, led by Chris Minns. Yesterday, the government said that if re-elected, up to 500,000 people will be able to access hundreds of dollars in rebates on toll fees. Tolls are a big issue in New South Wales. The opposition has been calling on the government to release a delayed review of the city's expansive toll network. Yesterday, the Premier said a major restructure of the system will happen by 2025.
All right, moving on to overseas news now, and there's been another mass shooting in the US with 7 people killed in 2 related incidents at a mushroom farm and at a trucking company south of San Francisco.
4 people were killed at the farm and 3 at the trucking business. A 67-year-old suspect who works at one of the companies has been arrested in connection with the shootings. Authorities called him a disgruntled worker. Of course, it follows the tragic killing of 11 people over the weekend at a ballroom dance hall outside of Los Angeles. 10 people died on site. Unfortunately, another person has died over the past 24 hours from that incident.
Yeah, it sure is tragic. Now, Sean, Bill Gates has been in Australia talking up artificial intelligence. Well, his company, Microsoft, has now confirmed a multi-billion-dollar investment in ChatGPT bot maker OpenAI.
Yes, don't you love that? ChatGPT bot maker OpenAI. That's a language we're all going to be talking.
Yeah, that is a sentence that I didn't even know existed, let alone one that I would actually say. But you're right, it's something that we are going to become very, very familiar with.
Yes, the Financial Times is reporting the investment could be up to $10 billion. It represents a technology that could transform Microsoft, helping it develop new productivity software alongside its Office applications, possibly renewing its challenge for market share against Google in search. Now, the deal also secures Microsoft's position as exclusive cloud computing provider to one of the world's leading AI startups and a boost to its Azure cloud business. When you think about all that, it's no wonder Bill Gates has been talking in Australia over the past few days about just how important AI is to the future of business.
Now, Sean, we're not big on self-congratulations here at Fear and Greed, but I'm trying to be modest here. But right. I feel like we deserve a little bit of praise for the fact that it's taken us 25 days in this new year before we mention Elon Musk.
Well done, us.
It ends now, though. The Tesla billionaire who owns Twitter has forced his way back into our news cycle. His fortune has jumped $11 billion over just the past few days.
Yes, I mentioned earlier in the show that Tesla's share price has done well. It's up about 15% in the past few days. Now, Musk has been all over the place. In recent days, he's been giving testimony about his 2018 Tesla go private tweet. He's being sued for alleged securities fraud over the tweet, in which he said he was considering taking Tesla private at $420. He added that he had funding secured. Now, investors argue his claims about having the money secured to take the electric car maker private amounted to lies that saddled them with big losses before the plan was abandoned. That case is going on. His consolation, of course, is that his wealth has rebounded, as tech stocks in particular have surged.
You just want just a little bit more Musk, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any more Musk? Yeah.
One more Musk. His company, Twitter, is being sued by the Crown Estates, I think King Charles, for allegedly failing to pay the rent on its London headquarters.
Yes, the estate, which belongs to the King, filed a claim against Twitter and its UK subsidiary in the High Court. According to a report in the Telegraph of London, the Crown Estate administers thousands of acres of Crown-owned land across the UK, including 930,000 square metres of property in central London. Now, earlier this month, staff at Twitter's Singapore office were ordered to work from home after the company failed to pay its rent there on time. All Twitter signs and logos have been removed from its London headquarters in Eyre Street in Piccadilly, but one member of staff said the company still had a presence at the site. Anyway, Elon Musk taking on King Charles III.
It's a fascinating dispute to begin the year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a WWF fight.
Yeah, if you could think of like the strangest pairings to match up in a battle.
Yeah.
I reckon King Charles and Elon Musk would probably be up there.
I reckon they're both fairly quirky. They might get on quite well if they knew each other.
Oh, this would be fun.
That would be fun.
We'll see what we can do about that.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we can do very little about it, I'll tell you that. Sean, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Dr. Nicola Powell, Chief of Research and Economics at Domain.
Yes, it's all based on Domain's December quarter report about what's going on in the housing market, but really we talk a lot about what's going to happen in 2023.
Yeah, that's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, and check out the new episode of How Do They Afford That as well. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Wednesday, the 25th of January, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.